I've done my analysis this week with a view to what's coming this coming week when they play the Kangaroos on Sunday, Tonga, that is. And I'm also doing, Taylor, what I used to do quite often on Queensland League scene, where I
Mm.
take 20 minutes of one half and then 20 minutes of another. I've done that this week. And the reason I've done that is because it was clearly a game of two halves. New Zealand came home relatively strong or got their act together at half time. So I want to get across to the listener what I think the big difference was. Well, first of all, New Zealand put nothing together in the first half. They could not get themselves going whatsoever. Tonga came out of the traps really quickly. The very first set Tonga defended, I made a note that they were losing the contact line. And what I mean by the contact line, Taylor, you may remember this from
Mhm.
your days under me, is that when a tackle is made, so when a defender makes contact with an attacker, if you put an imaginary line there, if the attacker lands on their front, then the defender has lost the contact line.
Mm.
If the attacker gets knocked back, the defender has won the contact line. If it's neutral, I tend to say that the defender has won the contact line. The very first set that they defended, they weren't winning the contact lines. And I dare say the conversation came from the coaching box because the next set and onwards, they were really dominating the contact line defensively. In the second half, when they were dropping off, they were losing the contact line. So that absolutely lends itself to me that if they are going to beat Australia this weekend, and I'd love to see the game being close, they've got to win those contact lines. They've got to be physical and drive Australia back. Because if they don't, and they end up on the floor, they end up at marker as a dead marine or not quite getting into a square position, Australia will tear them apart. Defensively, Tonga are compressed, but their defensive line isn't very organised. I've got to be honest. Should it be so organised? The amount of training time they've had together is a question that I'm happy to leave alone because of the nature of the defensive system, right? But they were leaving their A defenders behind. So what I mean by that is the A defender doesn't get up quickly. So you have your hold and fold marker where your markers don't shoot out. And then your A defender really should move right up next to them. For those who don't know, the A defender is the first defender either side of the ruck, the B defender the next one, the C defender the next one, etc. And the A defenders weren't getting up, so the B defender was getting across and in front of A. So that suggests to me that if Australia move the ball a little bit, they're going to have some trouble, Tonga. The also occasionally they got their numbers wrong, particularly on tap penalties. So
Mm.
if Australia tap a penalty and just pass the ball twice to the opposite side of the field, Tonga are going to have to shift quickly. They had a jagged line quite a lot. Their edge defense is somewhat weak. They conceded a try in the second half when all their edge defenders turned in, missed the tackles, or missed the opportunity to make the tackle. New Zealand turned the ball back inside, and the inside slide went missing. So basically, if Australia play football, if Australia keep it together in terms of completions and execution, Tonga have to make sure that they win those contact lines. Otherwise, there's too much frailty in their defense at the minute, I think, and they could get really exposed. In terms of offense, very the stuff you've seen 1,000 times. They were excellent at doing the simple things. They went down the middle. They then sometimes ran at the 6, sometimes ran at the 7. But when they were good, Taylor and Brendon, it was when they went outside, down the tram lines, down the short sides and things like that. They did that a little bit. They made a break quite early, or a semi break quite early, and that rattled New Zealand. Good ball attack. Again, the first set, and they even scored off it, but they were just playing within those tram lines. And all of a sudden, they did a line shot that went outside the tram lines and they went over into the corner. For those who don't understand what the tram lines are, if you look at the field, you have your horizontal 10-meter lines, but then vertically, you have a line 10 meters in and a line 20 meters in. They're your tram lines. So, a few things there. Tonga have got to win the contact line. They've got to play some football. When they put in that shock therapy, when they didn't just go down the middle, New Zealand couldn't deal with it. Australia will be better at dealing with it. But Tonga have really got to win the contact line. I get the impression, Taylor, and I'm talking myself into this a bit as I talk about the bits that I saw, Australia are going to be too good for them eventually.
I agree. I do think that, but what I will say is that we haven't seen a very good Australian outing, a very good Kangaroos outing. So I think Australia will be technically too good for them. I think with the fact that they could sit down over the weekend, watch the game, download it, will certainly help the Australians. This week in camp, leading up to it, we haven't seen the best Australian side. That's just how it is. And we've had an inability to score points where we probably should have. We could have found a lot more points in both games against Tonga and New Zealand in the round robin sort of setup. So if we're not icing the execution of that skill, if we're not finding those passes and the game is relatively close, then anything could happen. Anything could happen. So that's my only thought process. I do agree with you, however. That win or loss at the contact line that you mentioned, that was what I was alluding to with just how physically tough they were. You mentioned they lost the first set, and then the message come down and they won them continuously after that. I just don't think they had any give in them, and they'll need to pull out another effort like that to even stay in the ballpark of Australia.
What concerns me, Rosie, is that how they dropped off in the second half. They did start the second half okay,